Walter M. Sterling, Sterling on Sunday. There's Merle Temple. Merle Temple is a real man. How are you, Merle?
Hey, Walter. I'm just still trying to recover from the images from that Florida report.
I know that even as a real man, the way you are, the images from the Florida report can be terrifying.
Well, I signed books a lot in Florida, so I enjoyed that.
Now, you were one of the first DEA agents in America. Drug dealers tried to bury you alive. Or every bad thing possible that could happen to a DEA agent, being shot at, attempted to be kidnapped, somebody tried to bury you alive, Mexicans were chasing after you. Every bad thing as a DEA agent possible happened to Merle Temple. And now Merle Temple has taken the low-risk profession of writing novels. Merle, here's your plug. What's the name of your new novel?
Well, it'll be out in the fall. It's called Blood on the Ground, Living and Dying and Not. It'll be the fifth in the Michael Parker series, and people can go to merletemple.com to take a look, or to Amazon.
All right, I've got two big questions for Merle Temple. Merle Temple, former DEA agent, and a real man who probably understands sports. Do you understand sports, Merle?
Too well, I think.
Yeah, you see, I don't understand sports. I don't understand anything about sports, and I barely know any girls. So you're a real man. And then finally today, for the first time ever, I've had you on before, for the first time ever, I saw a picture of you. Oh, my God, not only are you a real guy and a former DEA agent, you happen to be really handsome. Either that or it's great photoshopping. So you have no trouble with girls. I have two questions for you, Merle. One of the greatest scams of our time is the so-called opioid epidemic. And I'm like, there is no opioid epidemic. There is and has always been a heroin epidemic. And now, for some bizarro world reason, and I have many theories on this, heroin has been lumped in with Grandma's Percocet. Grandma's not overusing her Percocet. She's not running out on the street to get street fentanyl. She doesn't turn to street heroin when her Percocet is shut off by the doctor because the state says you can no longer prescribe Percocet. Grandma just has to suffer. Meanwhile, the problem is heroin. And rather than punishing the drug dealers and stopping the flow of heroin into America, they're punishing doctors and grandma. Why, if I go to Italy, Merle, I'll get to the question, trust me. If I go to Italy and I bring back a cup and saucer that I didn't declare, and they find that, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a fine at best, jail at worst, but I'm definitely going to be taken into the other room for 2 hours. Meanwhile, while my cup and saucer is coming into LaGuardia Airport, 10 tons of heroin are coming across the border and nobody's stopping it. The problem is the heroin epidemic. Merle, as somebody who tried to stop it 20, 30 years ago, it's still going on. The problem is as big as ever. Why can't they stop the flow of heroin into America?
Well, I don't think there's a will to stop it, and you've got to secure the border. I mean, that's just basic. You've got to secure the border, and heroin now is so cheap as compared to our day. It's just you can buy enough heroin to kill you for just little of nothing.
Why is there no will? Why doesn't our government have the will to stop heroin coming into the country, Merle Temple?
Well, that's $1 million question. If I knew the answer to that, I'd have a great book if I could prove it. But it's the border is porous. There are so many channels. There's so much money involved that when DEA or whoever, Customs or Homeland Security, when they shut off one avenue, 3 more spring up to take its place because the profits are just so immense. You know, it's like trying to dam up the Mississippi River with a shovel.
You believe that many a government agency, many a government official is bribed like crazy to keep this flow coming in. Is that right?
I think when you have that much money thrown around, you're always going to have people who are going to be tempted to take the money. It was true in our day, and it's human nature. We live in a fallen world, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And then you have informants who government agencies who, to keep the heat off of them, they'll turn in a minor dealer compared to them in order to, keep the quotas going for arrest and stuff. Don't mean to criticize any of the agents, who are working hard and risking their lives, but there's and then there's politics involved, and you got governments trying to appease other governments, and they'll cite national security and those type things. So it's you got some good folks there. Some friends of mine. I visited one in Florida. Speaking of Florida, in a secret location. I hadn't seen him in a long time. He's still active in South America, but he was home in Florida, and the perimeter security was so tight it was hard to get in there because there were contracts out on him from people in South America who were looking for him, and they would kill him and his family if they found where they were.
Merle Temple was one of the first DEA agents. He now writes terrific books about the life of DEA agents and other undercover officials. Which country produces the most heroin, Merle Temple? Which country produces the most heroin?
Well, most of the heroin that we see comes through Mexico. The brown heroin, there's still white heroin coming in, but it's constantly changing. Back in our day, the white heroin came from Turkey and places like that, where they harvested in Afghanistan.
Where are the poppies?
I think there's still poppies probably in places like Afghanistan, where we're, spending a lot of money and a lot of American blood to try to fight the other enemy. But most of the heroin that we see in this part of the world, comes through the border. They just arrested an 80-something-year-old grandmother. Talking about grandmothers, she had almost $1 million worth of heroin on her, smuggling it coming across the southern border.
As an undercover federal agent, when you look at the videos of the World Trade Tower and World Trade Center number 7, and you see them collapse in 10 seconds, does it look like a controlled explosion to you? Does it look like controlled demolition to you? Does it all kind of stink?
Well, it looks strange to me, and I have two connections to that. One was the federal guard in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. She was charged with watching the blind sheik. He was on the guard for 24 hours a day. He was watched 24 hours a day, and he issued the fatwa from prison for 9/11, and she was haunted because she thought it happened on her watch. But it turned out it was a liberal left-wing lawyer representing him who smuggled it out, and that started the whole thing. They later got the lawyer, and I think she died of cancer in prison. And then my good friend Jim Clemente, who is with Criminal Minds now, a producer and writer, but he was a top FBI profiler. He was a first responder to Ground Zero, and he breathed the dust, and he's been battling cancer ever since. So I have two connections, and actually a third connection. I met a man in Florida again who was in the Twin Towers that day, and he will tell you that it did not happen like the official report said it did, and he was in terrible shape. It just pulverized his bones, and he was a much shorter man than he used to be, and a broken man. And to hear his story would just make you weep. So,
well, what does he say? What's the big deviation that he said is from the official story about how the World Trade Center came down? What's the big deviation?
Well, he said it was much like what you said, and I don't know if it was or not, but he seemed to be an honest guy, and he was struggling, trying to get his story out, and he couldn't get it out on American media. And I think he had gone to media overseas to try to get his story out, and it was just, he was a very frustrated guy. He'd been through a lot, and he just wanted somebody to listen to him.
Merle Temple, one of the first DEA agents working in the terrifying place called Mississippi. That's terrifying enough to be a law enforcement agent in Mississippi, but to be an undercover is incredible. Merle Temple, you're one of the best guests we've ever had on Sterling on Sunday. Please share with us the name of the book that's coming out in a few months and the name of your latest book that we can buy right now.
It's Blood on the Ground, Living and Dying in Nod. That will be the new book. We're proud of it. It shows a lot of things that happened back in those days that we're paying for right now. Some of the radicals and that we encounter, the communists who try to take my picture and put my name in an underground newspaper. And you can go to Amazon or to merletemple.com and just start with Deputy, the first in the series, and work your way through. And truth is stranger than fiction.